You have wahm, shak, and dhan. Shak is when it could be either or, I don't know, the agnostic position. Dhan is probabilistic, and this is where they go. They go with probabilities. The highest probability here is this, this, and this. What causes heart disease? Well, we think that it has to do with a buildup of plaque, right? Arteriosclerosis. Well, what causes that? Why is it some people eat tons of butter, tons of it, and they never get heart disease? And then somebody else eats a little bit. Well, genetics plays a role here as well, right? And then they bring in another factor. And then you say, bring in something else. Well, why is it that the Italians eat this fat and actually they have low? Well, because this is this type of lipid actually lowers the cholesterol. So it's actually kind of paradoxical. And so it just keeps going and going and going. And it ends up all being dhan. It's conjecture. It's probabilistic, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But ultimately, it is conjecture. And what the mediocre scholars from their tradition want to make people believe is that we have absolute certainty and knowledge here. And again, reiterating what I said yesterday is that the more brilliant from amongst them are those who are willing to admit, in fact, that we know very little. مَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've only been given a little bit of knowledge. And they're willing to admit that. And there are some from amongst them. So Allah says about that they only follow dhan, and dhan does not enrich them. فَأَعْرِضْ عَمَّنْ تَوَلَّ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَلَمْ يَرِدْ إِلَّا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. So shun those who turn away from our message. In other words, do not take knowledge from them, because they will lead you astray. Turn away from these people, because they will lead you astray. And many, many Muslims have gone astray because they have gone into this thing without a foundation in their own tradition, and they get led astray. They get deluded. They enter into a delusional state, right? And this is what happens. Many, many people, right, going into universities without having any rooting in their own tradition. And suddenly they're filled with ideas that are actually quite alien and quite dangerous in terms of the Islamic tradition, and they become confused, right? Really, it's happened to many, many people. So Allah tells us to shun these people. Now, traditionally, Ibn al-Hajj gave a fatwa in his Madkhal. He said it's not permissible for Muslims to study with a non-Muslim unless that knowledge does not exist amongst the Muslims. In other words, it becomes permissible when that knowledge does not exist amongst the Muslims. Now, what has happened because of the post-colonial conditions and the mentality that has set in, you will find Muslims now who are more highly honored by getting a degree in Islamic studies from Cambridge University than they would be from Al-Azhar University or Zaytuna in Tunisia. In the Muslim world, they'll have more credibility. And what Dr. Suleiman Yang said to me is, what do you think of a Christian group if the minister comes to the congregation and they say, where'd you study Christianity, brother? And he says, I studied in Mecca. I got a degree in Christian theology at Al-Qura University. How long do you think he would last? as a teacher of Christian dogma, if he learned it from the Muslims. Totally unacceptable. So this is what's happened. Massive, just all of our criterions have been turned completely upside down. Our universities were dismantled. So the sources for our knowledge were literally dismantled. And you have the madrasa system, the university system was fought and opposed by the colonialists, ultimately restructured. This is what they did. And this is part of the thing. If you want to, like Paul, if you can't beat the Christians, get in and just distort it. Just change it. And this is what happens if you look at the restructuring of Al-Azhar in 1900, when Freemasonic infiltration of that university takes place, Lord Cromer, and you can see all of this is completely documented, and really, it's all documented. It's not made up. It's not made up. Our universities were infiltrated and restructured. This happens in Morocco, the Qarawiyyin, in 1927. The last university to have a traditional and true Islamic framework that I know of is the Kutubiyya or the Yusufiya in Marrakesh, which is restructured by the French in 1937. And there are still some graduates that are alive to this day in Morocco from that university, but they're very old. Now, the few places where Islam has maintained a traditional framework are places where the colonialists didn't get to. So if you go, for instance, to a place like the Deep Sahara,